Since its beginning, fans of A Nightmare on Elm Street have debated whether everybody's favourite killer who stalks you in your dreams, Freddy Krueger, was originally a child killer before he was sent to the great beyond to live on as a dream demon, or if he was a child molester on top of it all. Bleak stuff. A while back, this debate was answered, as it was revealed that Wes Craven's original screenplay did establish Freddy as a paedophile, but New Line Cinema asked for this to be taken out as to avoid controversy, as at the time there was a widely publicised string of attacks in California close to this subject. Subsequently, the 2010 remake saw filmmakers retcon Craven's original, nastier Freddy back into the script, and fans were not too happy. It seems making it clear that Freddy was a paedophile alters the character so much that it took the ambiguity away, and part of the appeal of Freddy has always been the audience's ability to partially root for him and get a kick out of his hijinks. Child murderer versus child molester murderer has been the biggest debate amongst Freddy fans for decades, but to move away from this ground, there's a bigger question that nobody is asking. Was Freddy ever even guilty of the crimes he was accused of to begin with? I'm Ash from What Culture, here to bust this franchise wide open and propose to you, what if Freddy Krueger was innocent all along? Now, in order for this theory to work, we have to examine the first Nightmare on Elm Street film as being the original creation of screenwriter and director Wes Craven. Craven wasn't involved in the direct sequel, Freddy's Revenge, and he had limited involvement with Part 3 Dream Warriors, so we can look at the original as a standalone work of an auteur. If you remember, the original film acts as both slasher film and a mystery, as final girl Nancy Thompson unearths the truth about Freddy Krueger, the man who is terrorizing her in her dreams and picking off her friends one by one. But does Nancy ever fully ascertain the truth about Krueger? In the scene where Nancy's mother finally tells her who Freddy Krueger is, she says the lawyers got fat and the judge got famous. Her dismissive tone shows where her opinion on the matter lies, but she's completely biased because she and the other parents of Elm Street were convinced Freddy was the culprit of a string of murders. In their blind rage, they took the law into their own hands and lynched Freddy. But bear in mind that historically, lynch mobs really don't have the greatest record of accuracy. Why would Nancy's mother be so racked with guilt herself if she was so sure of Freddy's guilt? The woman goes through life in a haze of vodka because she is deeply upset about something. Let's turn next to Freddy coming back from the dead. Why, if he was guilty to begin with, would he come back for retribution? Classically in folklore, you don't read about many damned souls coming back from the dead just because the due process of law wasn't adhered to. Freddy's role as a dream demon seeking revenge against those who falsely murdered him makes much more sense than him coming back just because he was victim to mob justice. Imagine you're just hanging out in your favourite boiler room, minding your own business, and then suddenly a group of angry parents shows up and burns you to a crisp for a crime you were just acquitted of. You'd be pretty ticked off too. Everyone in these movies jumps to the conclusion that Freddy was a child murderer when he was alive. At no point do any of the meddling teens in any of the original films bother to reopen the investigation. The original Elm Street film, however, leaves this unanswered. Now, Wes Craven was no fool. He earned degrees in psychology, philosophy and writing, and even taught at college level before he moved to Hollywood to become a filmmaker. Although a surface-level reading of Freddy paints him as pure, unadulterated evil, Craven himself did not believe that people were completely good or bad. Instead, Craven's films contained much more nuance, and it's possible that had he gone on to write and direct the sequels, he would have further developed the moral quandaries between Freddy Krueger and the parents who murdered him. The parents of Elm Street and its fictional city of Springwood, Ohio, were the real villains of Craven's script. The evil that Freddy became was a result of their mob action. And to be fair, Freddy's motive to seek revenge on the parents of Elm Street is actually carried out again in Part 2 and Part 3. The later sequels, Parts 4 to 6 and Freddy vs. Jason, then turn Freddy into an insatiable demon who literally feeds off the souls of the children he kills. This theory is strengthened when you look at the first sequel, which is actually subtitled Freddy's Revenge. Part 2 takes place 5 years after the events of the original and is a continuation of Freddy's primary objective, which is to get back at the people who did him wrong in life. A quick rundown of the plot is the house Nancy lived in the first film has been on the market for 5 years, but no one will buy it because of the horrors associated with it. Then a family moves into it and the teenage son, Jesse, begins having nightmares and sleepwalking. In this film, instead of going into the nightmares of the people he dispatches, Freddy instead visits Jesse in his dreams and uses his body as an avatar to commit his murders. Ultimately, Freddy uses Jesse's body to come out into the real world and wreaks havoc on a pool party. The first time Freddy proposes his plan to Jesse, he says, "I need you, Jesse. We got special work to do here, you and me." Which then brings us to the most peculiar murder in the entire series. As you may recall, the first victim in the film is Coach Snyder, the hard-ass and creepy gym teacher who has a thing for young boys. Ron Grady is even quoted as saying he likes pretty boys. Freddy uses Jesse's sleepwalking body to go to an S&M bar where he finds none other than his gym teacher, Coach Snyder, dressed in full leather daddy getup. Coach Snyder then takes Jesse back to the high school gymnasium, but before the coach can carry out whatever he had planned for Jesse, he gets viciously killed by Freddy. Here is what sticks out about this kill. In all the other films on the Nightmare on Elm Street canon, Freddy doesn't target adults. He does have to kill an adult every once in a while, but it's not really his jam. It's important to bear in mind that Freddy's modus operandi up until this point had been stalking and killing the children of the parents who killed him. So why all of a sudden is he targeting an adult in the second film, and why is Coach Snyder the first victim of this film? Following his established pattern, it would make sense for Freddy to use Jesse's body to go on a rampage against the other remaining neighborhood children. But what if Coach Snyder played some role in Freddy's backstory? Coach Snyder is shot at with balls, then lassoed by jump ropes and dragged into the shower room and strung up when he's killed. Freddy then snaps towels at the coach so many times it leaves bruises on his backside. This is Freddy performing role reversal on the coach, essentially switching the coach's role from sadist to victim. Freddy must have known this was what the coach did to many boys before. Then, as his final touch, Freddy reveals himself to the coach out of the steam and treads slowly towards him as the coach screams in acknowledgement of his imminent slaughter. Does it not look and sound like Coach Snyder recognises Freddy, and his screams evoke that he knows exactly what's coming to him and why? Part 2 is cast off by many fans of the series. The screenwriter obviously took it in a direction that was far different from the original. Freddy doesn't do Freddy-like things, there are only loose connections to the first film, and overall it feels like a cash grab by the studio to put out a sequel as fast as possible. It's pretty much considered non-canon the same way that Halloween 3 Season of the Witch deviates from the main story of that series. But as uneven tonally and frankly unscary it is, an argument could be made for Freddy's Revenge being a logical continuation of Freddy's story. Let's step back to the original film, but keep in mind everything I've said about the sequel. Nancy's mom, Marge, tells her about the court case, the lynching, and the understanding is that Freddy is now killing off the remaining children from the neighborhood. First he kills off Tina, but it's made to look like Rod killed her. Then he hangs Rod in his jail cell, making it look like a suicide. For those first two murders, Freddy was buying himself time as to not arouse suspicion when he was back. Then, when it comes to the murder of Glenn, this is a blatant display of power. The fountain of blood coming out of Glenn's bed that draws all of the town's police force to Glenn's house. Freddy is just waving it in their faces that he's back and they are powerless against him now. Then there's a face-off between Nancy and Freddy, which ends with his failure to kill Nancy, but he does successfully kill Marge. Whilst this is easily read as Freddy taking a consolation prize for not being able to kill Nancy, let us not forget that Marge was one of the parents responsible for Freddy's death in the first place. And we kind of have to take her statement to Nancy with a grain of salt. We don't know for sure Marge's level of involvement, but the fact that she was the one who took his glove, and that she says this chilling line of dialogue, "He can't get you now, he's dead honey because mommy killed him," the two factors heavily imply that Marge was the one who spearheaded the mob action against Freddy. So in the killing of Marge, Freddy does pick off one of the people who killed him. At the end of the day, that is a win for Freddy. Now, people poo-poo the sequel all the time because Freddy comes into the real world, and that takes away what's scary about Freddy. That he attacks you when you're most vulnerable, which is in your sleep. However, if you look at part 1 and 2 from Freddy's perspective, it makes more sense that Freddy would want to get out of the dream world and then enter the real world. At the end of part 1, Nancy pulls Freddy out of her dream. By doing this, she has unwittingly shown him a new aspect of his power that he may not have known about before. So in part 2, he takes the next evolutionary step to using his full power by manipulating Jesse into bringing him out of his dreams. And who does Freddy choose to kill the first time he gets back into the real world? Coach Snyder. A man Freddy knows has a thing for young boys, and given Ron Grady's statement early in the film, is common knowledge in this messed up little town. The killings of Marge Thompson and Coach Snyder have personal vendetta written all over them. Okay, now we need to talk about the little girls. You know, the ones dressed all in white with the white jump rope who sing the nursery rhyme, 1, 2, Freddy's coming for you. Often these little girls are interpreted to be the heralds who trumpet the coming of Freddy. When you see them jumping rope and hear the nursery rhyme, you know Freddy isn't far behind. But as these movies are about dreams, these images should be interpreted as one would interpret a dream. These girls are dressed all in white to the point where even the jump rope is white as well. They clearly represent innocence in Film Studies 101. Are they the little girls Freddy murdered while he was still alive, or could they instead be the girls whose innocence was taken from them and whose souls Freddy has been tasked with avenging? Seriously, the girls are never explained except for later in the series without Craven's involvement, when it is clarified they are souls trapped by Freddy. But the original has nothing to do with any of that, and even if they were trapped, maybe it's him trying to release them perhaps. If you don't want to believe that Freddy is out to avenge these little girls, then just take a listen to this. What did Coach Snyder get tied up with? White jump ropes. White jump ropes which he took out of the storage cabinet while Jesse was in the shower room, that he was clearly planning to use to tie his victim up with. How's that for a coincidence? And finally, going further with the dream symbolism, there is Freddy's red and green sweater. Craven explained many times over the years his reason for the red and green striped sweater was because he read that those two colours, when juxtaposed, are stressful for the eye to process. Symbolically, this reads as a visual cue for ambiguity, or cognitive dissonance, a mental condition coined in the 1950s to describe the mental conflict that occurs when beliefs or assumptions are contradicted by new information. The unease or tension that the conflict arouses in people is relieved by one of several defensive maneuvers. They reject, explain away, or avoid the new information, persuade themselves that no conflict really exists, reconcile the differences, or resort to any other defensive means of preserving stability or order in their conceptions of the world and of themselves. In other words, Freddy Krueger represents those hard truths that go against what people want to believe. We'll deny them, we'll try to drown them with alcohol, we'll put bars on our windows to try and keep them out, but they're already inside our homes. Oh, Wes Craven. Is it possible that he embedded this many layers into his creation? That is horror writing at its finest. So what do you think about this theory? Let us know in the comments section below. I've been Ash, and this has been That Film Theory. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe, and I will see you again soon. Thanks for watching.